Hello, today I'm going to talk about my schizophrenia once again. And this time I'm going to talk about the voices, the different voices. About a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, someone asked me what it was like to live with mental illness. And it started me on a very deep journey inside myself. And I really have taken a lot of time to try and get this right. Um, I made a video earlier about what it was like to live just in general with the mental illnesses that I have. But I wanted to take it a step deeper because during my therapy, this conversation came up and it's going to come up again in my next therapy session. So I wanted to talk about it. And that is, well, what voices do you hear? Can you recognize any of them? Um, are any of them constant, or what are the nature of your voices? So I've really sat and listened, and I've thought about the past, but I've also sat and listened in the present as I'm going through this med change, which has calmed the voices somewhat, but they're still there, and they're much more tolerable. And I've given them names, so it's like naming a pet. I have some pets in my head that just talk. So here we go. On the more positive side, I have the Sentinel, and I call it the Sentinel because it's kind of the guard or the gatekeeper um, to me. And its entire job and what it does in my head is rush around checking the environment, checking my mood, checking my body, checking everything, letting me know on a constant verbal basis what's going on with me. How am I feeling? What am I doing? Do I need medicine? Do I not need medicine? Did I do this? Did I not do that? What do my feet feel like? Because I'm diabetic. Is my blood sugar okay? The Sentinel takes in information. Is this important to me? Is this not important to me? And basically provides this nonstop, what they call racing mind. The Sentinel is always there, rushing up front to check me, and I've kind of put that person there, the Sentinel, more intentionally than a lot of the other ones, simply to keep myself from getting swept down the river, as I always call it. So Sentinel is always there first and foremost, and he's front and center. Now, another on the more, I don't really do good and bad, but on the more positive as opposed to more negative aspect, on the more positive side, I also have what I call my Disney voice. This is the voice in me that is totally detached from reality and really believed everything that I was taught as a child. I believed in Santa Claus, that love conquered all, good versus evil, all that kind of stuff. This is the idyllic me. This is the one that has the Victorian manners, um, etc., etc., etc. So all that Disney-esque um, viewpoint of life that a lot of us were shoveled when we were a child, it was shoveled into us. It has its own voice, and it gets indignant when things are not exactly the way they should be. So that's how the Disney voice works. It's very, go ahead and do this for somebody because it's so the right thing, or whatever, whatever. It's always very positive for the most part, but it can get offended or hurt um, when something doesn't go exactly the way it wants, or the way, quote, it should be, as if there are some sort of rules to life. The Disney voice is a lot of rules that people never live by. That's the best way I can describe the Disney voice. And then on the other positive voice, which is what I call the logic train. And the logic train is a voice that gets in my head, and no matter what situation I'm in, whether I'm having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, or I'm hearing other voices or seeing visions, or reading an article about something, or watching a video, or watching TV, or anything, whatever I'm doing, washing the dishes, the logic train's always there to make sure that there is a logic grounded basis for whatever it is I'm experiencing. And if my logic train gets offended, it screams, no, this is illogical, this is ridiculous, and then it will list the reasons why. So you'll notice that sometimes I will write, for those of you that follow me on Facebook, that I will write or I will post articles that offend my logic train. I will write snarky, usually sarcastic comments about them because they're absurd, absolutely absurd in my mind, in the logic train's mind. It just does not pass the smell test at all. And then if you get the Disney voice and the logic train to agree, it's curtains for you. It's curtains. There's no turning back. If two of my voices agree, it's curtains. Especially if it's two of the more positive ones. If they think you're a dick, you're a dick. So, now on the more negative side, I have the parent voice. And my parent voice is not uplifting at all. It's harsh and critical. It's constantly putting me down, telling me I can't do things, telling me I'm not worthy, that I'm stupid, etc., etc. The parent voice is very harsh and very critical. The family voice, which is different from the parent voice, is the one that basically talks to me about being rejected and not fitting in and things of that nature. Not necessarily being stupid, but not fitting in, being rejected. It'll put those negative thoughts in my head constantly. Whenever I give it enough time, if I give it any time, it just sits there and tells me, it reads me to filth, both the parent and the family voice. And they are different. So, and then we have what I call the doomsayer. The doomsayer is the world's going to end, and etc. I mean, everything is gloom and doom with the doomsayer. The doomsayer is forever negative about everything. The doomsayer doesn't get necessarily personal as far as like the parent and the family do about me individually. The doomsayer is more of a macro doomsayer. The world is coming to an end. The world is falling apart. The world around you is going to shit. And why bother, to put any effort in? There's no reason. It's just going to shit and you're not going to change it. So that's the doomsayer's voice. And it's rather prominent. I would even say it goes up there with the sentinel and the logic train. I think the next strongest voice after those two is the doomsayer. Definitely. Now, those are just like the constant players. Now we have additional players. And these are random. So bear with me. And there's two different kinds. So I have what I call my abnormal or my psychotic voices. And these are voices and sounds that have no message. They strike no emotion, and they make no sense at all. For example, one day I was sitting in a therapy session with a therapist, sitting on his couch in Florida, and all I could hear in my ear, which was making me absolutely wanting to jump out of my skin during this whole time, was I could hear. I grew up in Southern California, so we went out to the desert a lot, especially to go water skiing and stuff. Lake Havasu and Lake Mead. So we'd spend a lot of time driving out to the middle of nowhere in the desert. And back in the day, I don't know if it still exists out there, there used to be little homesteads along that were abandoned along the road, the highway. And usually somebody had dug a well, and usually there was a windmill to help pump water because it was very arid there. Now, since they had been there for so long and the weather had gotten to them, they would still turn, but they had rusted. And when it was particularly breezy and they were turning, they would squeak. It was a very unique sound, extremely unique sound, this squeaking. So here I am in Florida, sitting inside a therapist's office with an air conditioner running, and which is like white noise. But over all of that, besides I'm hearing the voices, even on top of the voices, I'm hearing this loud squeaking sound that exactly took me to the desert. It was exactly, from my childhood. It was the squeaking windmill, and it wouldn't stop. And there was no sense to it. It didn't make me mad or make me happy or make me nostalgic or anything. There was no emotion attached. It just was what it was, and it wouldn't stop. And it was maddening. And actually, because it wouldn't stop, I ended up checking myself in, I think it was for the second time, into a mental hospital um, because of that particular squeak. And I blamed it on the medication that I was taking. And so they changed the medication I was taking. And the squeak stopped. Imagine that. So those are my, and I also get visions, but those are different. I'm talking more auditory right now. Not my schizophrenic or my abnormal visions are the same thing. They make no sense. They just come out of the blue, and they don't particularly elicit an emotion or anything like that. There's no conversation. I don't talk with them. They don't talk to me. Now, the other sounds and voices I hear do elicit emotions and provide information and are basically alive to the extent that they're paranormal. So those voices have messages, they have emotions, and they make sense. They don't offend the logic train. My schizophrenic visions and voices affect my logic train. It will set the logic train off. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is all in your head. This is chemical. This is nonsense. Now, it won't do that with the paranormal voices. If there's a ghost or a spirit or whatever you want to call it trying to communicate with me or tell me something, or move something and intentionally make a noise, it will elicit a response from the logic train. This is to be listened to, or this is to be processed somehow. So that's how I differentiate the two. So I've really been thinking about this a lot. I'm much more complicated than I realized. It's hard to be me. Not in a good way. It's a pain in the ass. So those are the voices that I hear. And they go from A to Z. There's nothing that I haven't probably heard. And if I can attach it, even if it's abnormal, and I can attach it to a memory, like the squeaky windmill, it doesn't necessarily mean it has an emotional attachment to me. It just means that I can stick it in that slot because that's what it sounded like. But sometimes I hear things I've never heard before, in the abnormal and the paranormal, and there's nothing I can attach it to. And that's particularly true if something manifests in front of you, like a spirit, and introduces themselves and starts talking. That is somebody I've never heard before. I don't know necessarily. I don't often get my family or friends that are passed away coming to visit. They do occasionally, but not often. So usually it's some either it's a residual haunt around the house because I have lots of residual haunts here, or it's somebody new. Like, for example, um, I I heard all this banging and door slamming and stuff, and rattling my garage a couple of years ago, and it felt like a very angry, pissed off energy, and it just showed up one day, and every day it kind of kept going like this, and 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 this, until it finally left the house. But it was coming through my garage and through my laundry room and then out through the pool deck over by the well and then out the fence. It was gone. But while it was here, it was none too happy. It would slam doors and make the dogs go crazy, and it was pissed off. It would even scare the turtles. And it turned out, and it didn't want to talk at first because it was just pissed. And finally, it decided to let me know what it was because it ran through me. One day I happened to be standing in the wrong place, the wrong time in my house, and that energy went right through me. And it was just searing and angry and pissed. And I saw, and I got a name, and I saw this mission this person was on. It was just a crazy mission. I mean, they were just totally obsessed, and like I said, totally indignant and totally pissed. And this was a person who crashed in the Value Jet crash in Miami many, many years ago. I think back in the 90s. And I looked up the name that I was given, and it was on the passenger manifest, and they all died. And this particular person was a female, and she was from, I believe, Kentucky, and she was trying to get home, but she didn't know. First of all, she didn't realize truly that she was dead. She just knew she was late, and she knew she wasn't where she was supposed to be, and she was pissed. So she had this attitude like, excuse my French, fuck it, I'm going home. I'm just gonna walk. So she's been walking, but since she didn't really know where she was, she kind of, like I said, she'd make a little bit of progress, and then she'd have to start back some ways back and make a little bit more progress and start some ways back. It was like this all the time, and that's what has been taking her decades to get home. Now I live in kind of central West Florida. So she's traveled several hundred miles over the decades to get back to Kentucky. And when I finally figured out what it was and who she was and what the problem was, I kind of pointed her, I looked at a map online, so then I was able to point her in the right direction. I affirmed to her, you are heading in generally the right direction. But this is the course that will take you exactly to your town. So she seemed to be very pleased that someone was able to communicate with her, because that had frustrated her for a long time. That there was like zero communication. That was very confusing to her and very frustrating. That no one was helping her give her directions, but I helped give her directions so she could get home, and wished her luck. And eventually she cycled through my house. She was gone forever, and I hope she eventually gets home and finds peace in that state. So that's something that elicits emotion. That's a paranormal, as opposed to the squeaky wind that just comes out of nowhere for no reason. So anyway, that's the voices that I hear and the noises that I hear as a schizophrenic or schizoaffective. So for those of you that maybe have schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia, you might want to take time to isolate your voices if you can, and then give them a name or something or a label. It'll help you deal with them more. And then it's helped me. And it'll help you understand where they're coming from so that you can ignore the more negative and you can listen to the more positive, because just being negative and miserable as a mentally ill person is not helping you or anybody else. So that's my 2 cents, and I'll talk to you later.